Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any moderators out there and or channel members. Today we have a very special guest who I met at Contact in the Desert this year, Lauren Anton. But before I bring her on, a reminder that super chats and super stickers are available and will be read out live during the show. If you have any questions that you would like addressed, that is the best way to get them answered. Send in those super chats. PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description and are a great way to help support the show and my work. And also, Ryder Ranger channel memberships are available and is really the best way to help support the show monthly for less than a cup of coffee. And if you become a Ryder Ranger channel member, you get access to bonus episodes. There is a huge back catalog of Ryder Ranger channel member only episodes. So help support the show monthly and get access to those bonus episodes. So with that down, our first time guest today, she is a shaman instructor and a lifelong experiencer. She has extensive knowledge of angels, aliens, and the paranormal. Lauren Anton, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Ryder. Good to see you again.
Yeah, this is really just a pre-setup for the show. Okay, I want everyone to know that I spent hours and hours looking for this clip from Alex Jones from Joe Rogan. That's very relevant to the show that we're going to do here right now today. That I remembered very vividly to play on this show here today with you, Lauren, and we're going to play that clip a little later on. But I was getting to the point where I was getting very agitated. Okay, because I distinctly remember the episode that I'm referring to, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And Google didn't help at all. I listened to all of the Joe Rogan, Alex Jones episodes that I could find on YouTube. It's not there. I listened to the one that was from 2017 that was like 3.5 hours long. I read through all the transcripts. I listened to the 4 hour long with Tim Dillon that happened in 2020. It wasn't in there. I read through all of the YouTube transcripts. It wasn't in there. I was seriously like, what is going on here? I was like, they had to have wiped it and just made it seem like the episode didn't even exist. I even Googled how many times has Alex Jones been on Joe Rogan. Google wouldn't tell me. All that popped up was the two that I just mentioned, the one from 2017 and the one from 2020. And I thought, okay, Google's trying to gaslight me here and act like this episode doesn't exist. But I was on a mission, Lauren. Okay. I was going to find this episode if it was the last thing that I do because I knew that it existed. I remembered listening to it and I had a very detailed memory of it because I feel like I remember a lot of things. I can remember everything that I've ever said and that anyone has ever told me. And of course, I can't, repeat it verbatim what other people tell me, but you get the point here. So I was searching message boards, rephrasing Google searches. Nothing was coming up. It had been wiped from the internet completely. It's not there anywhere, not even a mention of it. But needless to say, I found it. And we're going to play it here a little later on. But I just wanted to let everyone know how difficult of a time I had to try and find this freaking clip. And I wanted to play it here for everyone today and for you, Lauren. Anyway, like I said, we're going to play it here in a little while. But Lauren, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it a lot. We had a fantastic conversation at Contact in the Desert this year. And listening to your story, I found it very fascinating. And I wanted to bring you on to let my audience also hear it as well and, come to their own conclusion. But I feel as if you're a genuine human being, and I'm excited to speak with you. So take us from the beginning. We're going old school, Raised by Giants here. Take us from the beginning. How did this all start for you, Lauren?
As a child, I was very connected to nature and I could hear trees talk. I understood animals very well. I could hear rocks speak to me. As I got older, it evolved into seeing dead people and having interactions with them and having a lot of experiences with ghosts. And as I became a teenager, it morphed again into more of what I would call Harry Potter school. Things became very interesting. It was frightening, a lot of experiences that I was having. So with that, became older into my 20s. Harry Potter school really picked up. Um, it seemed like the universe, I didn't realize it at the time. In retrospect, I can look back and say that the universe definitely had its plan for an education for me. But that's where a lot of experiences with the paranormal began. And it created a lot of fear within myself because I didn't understand. And as a child and a teenager, I hated scary movies because I realized that what was in them was actually true. So I tried to avoid those. But anyway, as I got older, things really picked up. And also, I feel like a lot of people started to come my way. I was put in front of a lot of people that were having problems with things they didn't understand. And I seemed to have an innate ability to understand that and to comfort these people and to assist them in whatever it is they were trying to accomplish, whether they wanted to get something out of their home. I didn't have any formal training, but I feel like it was just an innate understanding that I have, a genetic memory, if you will. Um, anyway, it, later on in life, when I was in my 30s, I started to have a lot of paranormal experiences in my own home. And I just was constantly surrounded by a variety of beings and had a lot of understanding. I developed a lot of understanding of how to interact or accomplish removing them. So with that, eventually that morphed dramatically. It was like a light switch was turned off, um, and another turned on, and I started to have experiences with angels. And again, like I say, in retrospect, it's very interesting how I feel that the universe had a plan for me about it was like a co-creation of my skills. Um, So I started to see angels. And my first experience was, well, technically it was my second experience, but my first experience, second experience was extremely profound and altered me. And uh, that experience led to an understanding that I was supposed to study ancient civilizations and humanity, and I was directed towards learning shamanism. So I started studying shamanism and became very versed with that. And that was a parallel education that was occurring at the same time when I was having visits from angels. The angel experiences lasted approximately 13 years. And during that time, I had become a practicing shaman, and it was nice to put an earthly language on what I had learned from angels. In the beginning, when I was having these experiences, you always question your sanity just a little bit, or what you're told. Or I wasn't told, I was shown, or I information was transferred to me. And so when I would have this information, I would use my logical mind later to wonder if what I was shown exists or is true, or how it could be true, because I was shown how to heal people. And I was shown things about this world that we live in and who we are and how we came to be and what our true capabilities are. And I feel that shamanism, I was trained in the South American tradition. I feel that shamanism assisted me in putting an earthly language to it and validated for me the things that I had learned from angels, the information I had gathered. And with that, I once I had enough validation, and I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I've learned. This is what this is. Now there's a process. This is how this works. I no longer questioned what I had been shown by angels. And so it really assisted me in realizing that everything that was happening to me was happening for a reason. And I had a certain purpose to fulfill here.
That's interesting. Now you say that you had these paranormal experiences when you were growing up. What was like the first paranormal experience that you had? Because I had several growing up as well, and I don't talk about them. I don't really get into them, and I don't mess with the paranormal anymore. Like I just completely stay away from it because it's really real and it screwed up a lot of stuff for me. So like I don't even touch it. I don't go into any place anymore. I used to be a paranormal investigator, and I'm like, nah, not doing it anymore. Stuff's too real. And I'm just not messing with it. So what was um, what was that first paranormal experience for you?
My first non human was a demon.
What did it look like? Was it like scary, like everyone says that demons are, or was it a shadow, or what?
No, 100% typical, stereotypical, what you would think in a movie or in art would be a demon. And it was extremely frightening. And it was very powerful. Also, I've learned along the way because I've had a lot of experiences with different entities and different demons. There's definitely a hierarchy. They have different abilities. So mine, the first one was kind of one of the higher ones. It was very frightening.
Now, this is nothing against you, I think, but I think it's important to talk about it right from the beginning. Were you under the influence of any drugs, alcohol, or any of that during the time that you were having these experiences?
Thank you, because that's a completely valid and legitimate question. And it's interesting because whenever I would express these experiences to people, I always felt it necessary to start the conversation with that, saying, look, I promise I'm not crazy. I don't do drugs. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not having hallucinations. This 100% happened to me. So that's who I was. And no, I was not.
Yeah, people get upset when you ask that question, but I think it's a very important question because it can be done. Like if you're on some form of drugs or alcohol, like it can influence your perception of reality, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, I had to have been the most boring teenager and young person. I never got into any of that.
Yeah, that's really good. So now that we've cleared that up, when we were talking at Contact in the Desert, you were talking. I want you to get into your first angel experience and how they put information into you and what that information was. You just mentioned that it was healing information and to study ancient civilizations. Now, when a lot of people, that's how you can kind of get a reading on who's kind of telling the truth and who's not, because a lot of people claim that they get like visions of the future and that they see that everything's going to collapse and destroy, and then they talk about it and never happened, you know what I mean? So this would make sense if it was actually something that was in it for your better understanding and your greater good, is to give you information about us and like what we're doing here and who we are, and how to further that knowledge. So can you get into that?
Sure. So the very first experience I had happened pre what I had told you about. And one day I was writing utility bills at my desk in my office, and straight ahead, the way the house was structured, there were double doors that opened up into like the entryway of the home, and I could see into the formal living room. And I was writing bills, and I was compelled to look up something. I just really felt an urge to look up, and I looked up and into the formal living room, and I saw a rectangle, a golden rectangle, horizontal, and it looked like a picture frame, but with no picture in it because I could see the wall and everything behind it. And as I was looking at this, I thought, wow, there's a rectangle suspended in my living room. And then as I was observing this, there were a lot of twinkles that started, some little adorable little sweet bright twinkles. And the twinkles started to pick up a little bit and were rapidly flashing, and there became more of them. And I was looking at this light show, and I realized that it wasn't just light that I was seeing. I realized that it was music. And I started to hear sound in my ears. And as I was processing all of this information, I realized that, I started to feel some interesting sensations. And I thought, wow, this is interacting with me. And logically I'm thinking, what is this? Um, and after about, what could have been maybe a minute, it went away. And I had told my husband about this, and he had just kind of, he thought I was a little loopy. But if I might pause for a moment, because to back up, this was just on the heels of a lot of frightening things happening. So I was also telling my husband about all of these frightening things that were happening, and he just didn't know what to make of it. He's like, built a different way. He's just constructed a different way, and he was just processing this in a different way. And the information just really wasn't working for him, and I don't think he knew how to handle what I was telling him. So I told him about this rectangle. Anyway, so with that, I think my husband at the time, he thought that I should probably be evaluated. So he had that in his mind. He's like, you might need to take a trip up to the psychiatric unit and be evaluated. And I was so upset about that. And I think that a lot of people that have these types of experiences are very misunderstood. They're not believed, and these things do exist. And people need to come to grips with the fact that this is all true. And so I'll touch that topic later. So
That's what happened to me as well when I was growing up. When
yeah,
I told my parents about what I was experiencing, they took me to the
yeah,
doctor, and then I just stopped talking about it. I just kept it to myself because I realized that that's what was going to happen.
yes, and that's so unfair to people, because I think everybody else is missing the boat because we're messengers, and we're conduits. So the very first, the second experience, which I really count as the first experience because it was massively intense. Um, oh, and to also say, I used to stay up very late at night because at the time I had very young children. They were toddlers. And I was always the last person awake at night because that's when I got everything done. And so I'd be up till 2 o'clock in the morning running around the house, prepping things for the next day. And I remember coming down the hallway one night and I heard this booming voice in my head. Um, and here you go, voices in your head, right? But I think we all know our personal voice in our head and what that sounds like versus when we're getting other information in our head. So um, I heard this intense, strong voice repeat the words Archangel Michael. So coming down the hallway, I just heard, Archangel Michael, Archangel Michael. And I finally just stopped in the hallway and out loud I said, okay, I get it. Tomorrow I'll look into it, because I was not raised a religious person. I was baptized into the Greek Orthodox Church as a child, but I was not raised in that church and did not participate in going to church. So I really would say that I don't have a religious background. So that influence was not taking over in any way. So coming, I make this proclamation. Okay, I hear you. Okay, I'll look into it. So just within a few days of that, um, my husband came home from work unexpectedly one day for lunch, but late in the afternoon. And I was in the kitchen doing dishes, and we had at the front of the house double doors that opened up and into a grand staircase that went upstairs. And to the left was the office, and to the right was the dining room and formal living room. And the kitchen, you could go either way around the staircase to get to the kitchen. And I heard his voice, and he's like, Lauren, Lauren, come here. And I'm like, hold on, hold on. He's like, no, you better come here. There's someone here to see you. And I'm like, okay. So I washed the soap off my hands and threw the dish rag over my shoulder. And I walked from the kitchen into the front of the house, front area of the home. And the sight that I came upon was the left side of my husband's body staring up into the ceiling. And I looked at him, and I looked over, and I looked up, and there it was, a ginormous angel that took up the entire height and width of that room. And we had 27-foot ceilings. And there was this angel that it was very geometric. It did not look like a human, it was geometry. The body was a triangle, the head was a circle, the wings were wings, and they looked beautiful, and they looked like real beautiful wings. And from my perspective, looking at it, there you go, pretty much that.
I mean, with real wings, but it would look
But
like
with real
like
wings. Yeah, with real wings. That's a very close. It looked like a Christmas ornament, really. And as I saw it, looking at it on what would be my left, but its right, was what looked like a present at the base of the triangle, but it was a cube. So it looked like a present. It was a cube.
Now, your husband seen this before. Well, your ex-husband, he's seen this before you seen it. So, how long was he in there looking at this before?
He was with me the entire time.
Okay.
And again, in retrospect, I feel like that occurred with him present, because it's not that he's a wonderful person, but he just isn't wired that way. And so when I was telling him all these stories from previous experiences, he just didn't know how to cope with them. And I really feel in retrospect that this occurred in front of him so that he'd lay off. so that I wouldn't go to the psychiatric unit. And he was stunned. So anyway, this angel was two-dimensional. The wings, the triangle body, the circle head were all two-dimensional, but the cube at the base was three-dimensional. And the entire thing was the same color of white, and it was the most beautiful color of white you've ever seen. But that color of white doesn't exist here because I've never seen it before. But I identify it as being white, and it was so beautiful. And it was very bright, but it was very easy to look at. So this is in front of us, and I didn't want to burst out and say, oh my God, you see this angel? So I said, what do you see? And he said, I don't know. What do you see? So we played this ridiculous game with each other because nobody wanted to say it's an angel. So finally, I'm the one that said, I'm looking at an angel. And he said, so am I. So we proceeded to have this analytical conversation about what we were looking at. And while this was occurring, and this was so large, you could not take it in by just looking in one area. I had to take it in sections. And so anyway, we were comparing this and having this absolutely ridiculous dialogue about what we were seeing. And at a certain point, at the center of the triangle, which would equate to somebody's solar plexus, and at the center of the cube, an aperture opened up, and it just like opened up at the same time. And
like a camera aperture?
Absolutely, yeah. And at the same time, white light a different color of white light started to come out of both of those areas. And then at a certain point, it converged and it was coming towards me, towards us. And that white light had motion to it. It had a ripple effect. It was it was easy to think of it as like a living light. It was alive. It had motion. It had like almost a personality, and it had a different color of white. And again, the motion, the rippling effect, the motion of it, very hard to describe. There's not adequate words in our language to describe what I was looking at. But the closest thing that I can tell you that it reminded me of was if you were at like in a gym or a spa, and you're going down a hallway where there's a swimming pool nearby, and you see the reflection of the ripples of the swimming pool on a wall. Similar, but nowhere near that, but similar. So this ripple river of light made contact with us, and once it did, at the origin, colored light started to emerge and corkscrew out of that and be carried through this river of light towards us. And as it was corkscrewing out, it was the most beautiful. They were the most beautiful colors, and it would shift colors as it came out, and the colors that were coming towards us would stay intact. They weren't fading, and so they were the solid color as it came towards us, and then just more colors started to come out. And as I'm looking at this happening, the language that we have for the colors that we know, I could identify those, the pink, blue, green. They never, and on the color wheel, purple and blue blue and red make purple, right? There were logical things happening where I could identify names of color, but there were colors coming out that I had never seen before that don't exist here. And I had no words for them, but I was just taking this experience in. As the color came towards me and made contact with my body, every time a color of light made contact with my body, I would feel a corresponding emotion. And I would recognize most of those emotions, but the colors that I didn't recognize, they had corresponding emotions that I didn't recognize, because those don't exist here. Or if they do, we're like numb to them because something has been turned off within us, and we're not able to experience those things. Okay. So as this was occurring and I was feeling all of this, I was identifying feelings like extreme feelings of like love and peace and bliss and forgiveness and all these different emotions that we're familiar with, and some that we're not. Simultaneously, as I was looking at the wings, and they were so gorgeous, tears were coming out of my eyes because it was having such a visceral effect on my body. But I was taking in the enormity of it, and I seemed to be more focused on this side because this is where I was. But each row of feathers, and they were so beautiful and completely mathematically symmetrical. Every tip, as I would take in the rows and the feathers, and I would see each tip, I would have yet another physical reaction inside of my body when I would focus in and make contact with each feather tip. And it occurred to me that they're data points, and they were transmitting information to me. So the whole experience was I mean, there's just no words. There are inadequate words to describe what it felt like.
Did
And
you feel any fear at any point in time during this,
zero,
or was it all love and hope and peace?
yeah, zero, none, and yes to the second thing you said. Yeah.
So not even when the red collar, because red is normally associated with fear and hate. So even when the red collar hit you, you didn't feel any fear?
No, no, not at all.
Mm.
Um, so, um, this entire experience lasted, it was hard to really say how long this experience lasted, but I would say several minutes. Um,
Now, what
it,
was happening to your ex-husband during this time? Was he also getting hit with this information? Was the spiral of information also hitting him? Was it hitting you both at the same time, or what was going on there?
so it's hard to say. I don't think it was necessarily just coming at me because this river of light was quite wide. So I feel like it was also in his direction as well. We were side by side, basically touching shoulders. And during all of this, like I'm telling you, we were having this ridiculous dialogue. So a lot was going on because, you know, you can take something in, but you can also be having a conversation about something. So, but I will say, so what ended up happening is at a certain point, he just became very agitated because I was talking about the light, I was talking about the color, I was talking about how I was feeling. Not every single time, because sometimes I couldn't speak. When I was experiencing some of these emotions, I could not speak at all. But um, at one point, he just kind of had a little bit of a meltdown, maybe, and he said something not very nice, um, kind of like, mm, "F this. That's not an angel." And no sooner had he said that, that the colored light corkscrewed backwards, the river of light like retracted into the two areas, the apertures closed, and then the entire angel began to fade equally and just dim until it was no longer in the room. And then I got very upset with him and I said, "Why did you say that? You made it go away, you know?" So, anyway, after that, he didn't really speak too much. We didn't talk about what had happened after that, really. The next morning, I woke up and I loved going out on my front porch in the morning to water my plants. And when I went out and I opened the doors, and by the way, it's interesting because at the time, I didn't know what the equinoxes were or the solstices. I was not wired that way to know those things. But this did occur on the spring equinox of that year. I always thought that was interesting when I later learned what equinoxes and solstices were. But I went outside that next morning, and when I walked outside, everything just looked different. The sky to me looked different. It was like more beautiful, more clear. The plants looked different. I could feel the plants vibrating. I could feel electricity in the air, and the air was vibrating. I was experiencing the world in an extremely different way. And
Did everything
that's
have
when I,
like a weird like glow to it, like a shimmering
yes,
like glow?
there was there was a beautiful glow or a light to everything. Yes, it was interesting. And with that, at that moment, it's like I got kind of hit with the proverbial lightning bolt because it absolutely hit me that I all of a sudden understood what we are and what we're made of and how we function. And um, I understood how to clean a human. I understood how to clean dense energy out of a human and to reintroduce a quantum of clean energy. Um, So I all of a sudden just knew a lot of things, and I had to understand what that all meant. It took me a little bit of time to process that because it wasn't clear at the moment, but soon after that, then I became aware of messages telling me to study um, shamanism, ancient civilizations. I was directed in a certain direction. I started to be visited by angels regularly. They would come approximately once a month, and sometimes they would appear to me in person during wake time, and other times I was taken either in my sleep or if I just kind of phased off. When I would be taken, I at the time I thought my body was up there because I would be taken off planet and I could look down at the earth, and it was a little frightening because I could see myself floating in space with angels around me. And I realize now that that wasn't my physical body, that was my light body that had been, my software had peeled off and gone up.
Right, you were having
And
an out of body experience.
yeah,
Which is a very real thing. What did the Earth look like from space?
what we see it as looking as, it was a beautiful blue marble with white. It was gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Was it more oval shaped or completely round?
Looked pretty round to me.
Hmm,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And now, do you think that you were having this out of body experience on your own? Because that's kind of like what dreams technically could be, right? Whenever you're dreaming, you're technically outside of your body, like you're in a different reality, you're in a different existence, and like maybe a fabricated existence. And it seems like whenever you dream, it's just for you. Like you're just surrounded by a bunch of NPC characters and a bunch of people that probably don't know that it's a fabrication of your mind. Do you think that this was you doing that, or do you think something was guiding you to get outside of your body?
Absolutely, it was not a dream. Even if I was taken during my sleep, I was not asleep during this situation. It was extremely vivid. I was extremely aware, and I would have interactions with them because when those experiences would happen, I would be surrounded by several of them, and they would gesture towards me. And when they would gesture towards me, I would again hear music, and it was really beautiful, and it just penetrated my body. It just put a deep vibration through my body, and it was quite an experience because it was just so intense, and it was paralyzing, but in a good way. And I could just feel everything, every cell of my body was just vibrating because they were transmitting information. So through the years, when I've developed my skills, I am very, very, very well versed about when I'm having a dream versus when I am not. And I can tell you, I was definitely not having dreams.
Did you ever have a near death experience when you were younger?
I did.
Mm.
I did.
That's really interesting because it seems like people that have near death experiences kind of get endowed with like some sort of ability. More oftentimes than not, people that have been close to death like that and come back, their life is different.
Mhm.
Have you ever thought of that? That maybe having a near death experience when you were younger kind of maybe brought some sort of ability to the forefront, because I think that we all have certain abilities, but how those abilities are unlocked is normally through trauma, and it's unfortunate that that's the way. But near death experiences is a trauma, and they figured that out a lot through the MK Ultra programs to like torture people to unlock their psychic abilities so that they can be used to do certain
Hmm.
things. I mean, there's 4 or 5 different MK Ultra sub projects that was just dedicated to psychic research and remote viewing and things like that. So, have you ever thought that your near death experience had something to do with all the other experiences throughout your life?
So, my comment on that would be, from what I've heard of other people having near death experiences, many of them talk about, going to the light or being in a different place, having a rich journey, a rich experience where they're, seeing things, and they're somewhere else. Okay, they've traveled somewhere else. It didn't happen that way for me. I wasn't that far gone, but I was on the bottom of a lake, drowning, and when I went down, I didn't have any air in my lungs, and I dropped like a rock, and I couldn't get back up. And when I touched bottom, I kept trying to push off and get up, but I was stuck down there. And and at a certain point, I sat down. And when I sat down, I was realizing that I was really running out of air. And so I wondered to myself, I want to just breathe just a little bit, maybe right here, and just, if I put my head down, if I could breathe a little bit and maybe suck some oxygen up my nose. But I actually tried that, and I got water up my nose, and I remember thinking my mother was going to kill me because I was only 11. And, what kid doesn't think, oh my God, my mom's going to be so mad at me, when she finds out I'm dead, right? So I decided that that's what was happening to me, and I was down there and I wasn't going back up. So I decided to let go, and I couldn't see very well down there anyway, but I just closed my eyes and decided to take a breath, and because I just couldn't hold my breath anymore, and I let go, and kind of the next thing I know, I felt the sensation of going up. And I don't know what I really thought about that, Ryder. I guess I thought I was dying, but it didn't happen to me like seeing a light or being anywhere else. And I certainly didn't get so far that I saw things like people see. Um, and I realized that I could feel something under my arms, and I realized there was something behind me, and something was behind me and had me under my arms. And I realized that that's why I was going up. And the next thing I know, I was on the shore, and I woke up face down in the sand, in the sandy dirt, and coughed a lot, and got up and went into the house where I was going. I was gone for the weekend with a bunch of young people, having an experience with a bunch of young people. It was actually a church situation with, yeah. So
Yeah, mine was just completely darkness, 100% darkness, just nothing. But there was so much peace and there was so much hope and love within that
mhm.
darkness. It was
So
like
when I was,
beautiful almost.
mm, mhm. And when I was going up and realized there was something behind me lifting me out of there, it felt very safe and I felt very secure. So to like answer your question, um, I feel like that. I mean, either, who knows what really happened, right? So either, who knows what really took me to the top, but it wasn't me. And I feel like there must have been a reason that I was taken to the top.
That's interesting. So let's give a little bit of a timeline on this in between you becoming a healer and figuring out how to heal people, and from your angel experience where the angel was putting information into your body, into your mind, what year was that angel experience? Do you remember?
2004.
2004. So what happens after that angel experience? How did you, because I think people have a really weird sense of like what healing actually is. There's a lot of fake healers and a lot of people that are talk a bunch of nonsense, especially on the internet when it comes to healing. I've only known one that I 100% believe is legit because I actually had the experience. And when he was working on me, I could 100% feel it. And I knew that he was doing something, right? And this was remotely too. I wasn't even in the same room as this individual. So the healing is real. It can be done. It's just there's a lot of charlatans and a lot of nonsense and a lot of bullshit out there when it comes to healing because people want to make money and make profit. Can you explain a little bit about healing and how it works? Because from my understanding, a real healer, a real shamanic healer, actually takes on the experiences of that individual. They can see like a timeline of events that this individual that you're healing, you can see their experiences of their life, you can see their traumas, you can see pretty much everything about them. And then you take that on and you transmute that and turn that into something positive. Is that sort of how it works?
Okay, so for me, and no, you're absolutely spot on. You do not have to be in the same room with someone because it's an illusion. The separation between us is there is no separation between us. Um, Distance is irrelevant. So when I'm tracking somebody, I enter different perceptual states to be able to track a person because humans have different layers. And so there's a physical layer, an emotional layer, a soul layer, and a pure energy layer. And there's information to be had in each area. And so
Could
when
you
I
explain what more details about what tracking is for people that don't understand or like know that? I know you might have kind of got into it a little bit, but what does tracking mean?
Okay, so if somebody is having an issue or they're having an emotional issue or they're having a physical problem and they want assistance from me, I'll always ask somebody, so what's up for you? Why do you need assistance? What are you looking to accomplish? And I'll ask them what's up on the table for them right then, but I don't want to hear too much because I don't want to have received ideas, right? So I just want a few words and then I'll say, okay, so what do you want to accomplish today? And then what I do is I just travel within. I just access them. And so I'm tracking, I track them. So, maybe some people might use I'm sure it's synonymous with other words. Like you could say, oh, what does a remote viewer do? Well, they extend their consciousness to another location to be able to ascertain information. It's the same thing. So I I set the intention to assist them for what they want assistance with, and I start looking, and I'm able to gather all kinds of rich information from them. All of the senses are involved. I can see things. I see stories. That everybody has rich stories because how humans are constructed. It's so the simple answer, the simple explanation is we're physically integrated with an energy body. So our physical body is our hardware and our energy body is our software. And just like our computers, those two systems are integrated. And our software, our light body, our energy body is with us always. So that's the difference between a live person and a non-alive person, right? Our energy body animates our physical body. So when someone passes, what's left here is their physical body, but what persists is the continuity of their consciousness, and that persists on and retains data, right? So every experience that you've ever had is stored as data within your software, within your energy body. And so this is a rich place of information. So when you access this, you get all kinds of information. So I can see stories, and it's not just from this lifetime. I can see past lives. I can see into the future, because time is an illusion. So you can see things. So I see things, I hear things, you can smell things, you can taste things, you can feel things, you feel all their stories. So it kind of reminds me, there's an adorable movie called Paul, about a little alien. Um, and at one point, he's healing one of the characters, a woman who has a blind eye. And that's a great scene, because when I saw that movie, I was like, yep, that's exactly what it's like. Because in that scene of the movie, he was having an interaction, an exchange with her, and her eye became healed. But in the process, his eye was shifting and began to look like hers. But then when the process was over, she had a healed eye. His eye was restored to normal. And I really related to that, because you really feel everything that's happening with somebody. So I can always know if somebody's having a physical problem. It's your liver, it's this, it's that, or an emotional problem. So when you get all of this data, it creates a complete picture, so that you understand where all their traumas are, and you can clear out all of the dense energy associated with experiences, so that they're moving through the world in a healed state, from a healed perspective, instead of a hurt perspective.
Now, when you were doing these healings, were you doing these healings in person?
Some, yes. Yes. If you're starting to move towards talking about hollow people, yes. At that time, early on in my career, I would try to do in-person sessions, and then I evolved into doing sessions remotely by phone.
So you can basically see a timeline with this tracking with a person, and we are going to get into the hollow people, because I think that this is very fascinating. I've always thought that there's been people out there that didn't have souls, that didn't have a consciousness. They're just kind of like a shell, like what you're talking about. They're just a physical body. They don't have anything else inside them. Have you ever ran into anyone like that didn't have any experiences, that didn't have anything in them, that is just a shell of a human? Well,
Yes.
maybe human, maybe not human.
Right. Because some people, you're right. Um, yes. I mean, some people are completely normal and human. They just like are lacking in some departments, but this is a completely different thing. Yes, I have run into two what looked like humans that were completely void of data, and it was shocking.
Well, tell us about that first experience, and what
Mhm.
happened, and what led up to that, and how you discovered that they were essentially hollow.
Okay, so I think a good place to start would be that probably about 2011, I was living in the Seattle area. I lived in a city called Kirkland, and I decided to apply to teach a class, a continuing education class, at your university, that's located in Kenmore, Washington. And I was accepted to teach a class there, and I class. It was a class about protection and boundaries and how to clear some energy. And there were a lot of students in that class, and it like a lot of students, and it caught the attention of the university. And I was approached by the director of continuing education, and she said, hey, how about you apply to become a program instructor, and you teach a lot of classes here. So I did, accepted, and I started to become a popular continuing education instructor at that university. And then meanwhile, in my private life, I started to have a lot of really strange paranormal experiences started to pick up at about that time as well. So 2011 and 2012 were like jumping with activity. So, when you teach a class like that, a lot of students become interested in what you do, and a lot of people will want a session privately. So I started to get some clients having in-person sessions. And when I would do my in-person sessions, you run across people are not cookie cutter. Everybody is so unique. But what I will say is that you absolutely know when someone's human, because everybody is rich with data. All your experiences, like I said, are stored within your energetic system. And it's just a wealth of information to be able, and there's so much there. So you can feel, taste, smell, hear things, things about people. And so it'd been about 2 years, and I was, getting a lot of interest in what I was doing. And so there was this one student that came to me, and it was a man, and he wanted to have a private session. I said, sure. So I scheduled it, and he came to the location that I was doing that at. And when I do a session with somebody, I never touch them. You don't touch anybody. So they were laying down, and I had them relaxed, and I found out, I'm like, what do you want to know about? And he didn't really have an answer what he wanted to know about. He said, I'm just curious about what you do, or what this is like. So I started to do a session on him, and I realized quickly that there was nothing there, because it's just instantaneous. The minute you make the decision to go there, you're there. And I thought, well, okay, this is odd. There's nothing here. And I kept looking, and I kept tracking. There's nothing there. There was absolutely nothing there. And let's take a pause there for a moment, because I want to make another comment. What's good to keep in mind is that when you do have a session with people, with a real live human, I always tell people, hey, don't feel like you can't talk to me during the session, because I work in split screens. So if you have a question, you can ask me, or if you have a comment, you feel free to speak. But you don't want to be really chatty and take yourself out of the process. But if you want to, you can speak to me, and I'll answer you. So when people do that, they will make comments. They make comments that make a lot of sense. They'll say, wow, I'm experiencing this, or I'm seeing this, or I feel this way. And it pertains to them, and it's something that they're experiencing or feeling, and they want to share that because either they want to take a deeper dive in that area, or something's going on. Makes perfect sense about what somebody's asking or saying. But this person, and keep in mind, this person, I there was nothing there, and it worried me at first, and I thought, what is this? Because this is not normal. And they asked a couple of questions, and the questions did not pertain to them. They pertained to me. And it was just not normal at all. They wanted to know how do you know how to do this? How many children do you have? I mean, abnormal questions that had nothing to do with them being there. So as I'm, we're like maybe 5 minutes into this, and there's nothing going on, and I'm thinking there's a serious problem here. And so at that point, I started to taste metal in my mouth, and that's a sign that you're dealing with a demon. If you taste metal, but I wasn't convinced it was a demon. But I realized that whatever was going on was not normal, and that there was nothing inside, and that I really felt threatened. And I thought, okay, it occurred to me too. I thought, I wonder if they can read my thoughts, because I wonder if they're catching on that that they're not human. And so I decided to fake the session. I decided to start saying things. I started talking a butterfly, animals, plants, stones, stories. All means something, right? So I started to bring up some symbolism. I absolutely faked the session. I didn't want to just sit there doing nothing, and I felt extremely vulnerable. Plus, I was in this location by myself with this thing, and I thought to myself, the last thing I remember thinking to myself was, what if I die, or what if I'm taken? And so that's it off. So I just absolutely shut my mind off, and I started faking it, and creating an internal dialogue that was fake.
Which
And
was
then,
probably a really good thing for you to do. You definitely took the best course of action, because there's a few things that could be going on there that we've previously talked about, that it could be something that was sent to you to figure out if you're a legit healer or not, to figure out if you're a real psychic, if you really have the abilities that you say that you have. That's a possibility. That they would send like a little spy to you to see if you actually, and if you would have said, I see nothing, you're a freaking cyborg, or you're not a human, then they would have known 100% that you were real. So that
mhm,
was probably the best course of action for you, to just make up what you made up.
I felt it. I felt it protected me, because it's like, oh, they can just think she's a fake, uh, you know. So, and then the second time it happened was the next quarter. And the next quarter, I was teaching a different class, and the next time it was a woman. And and then when I realized she wasn't real, and what was so bizarre about that one too, she had a wedding ring on, and she looked like a typical middle-aged housewife. Um, and she had this ring on, and we weren't too far into the session, again, like just 2-3 minutes in, and her eyes were closed. There is no way she could have known that I was looking at her ring, because she had a ring on her finger. Um, and she said, "Oh, my husband gave that to me, but it doesn't mean anything." And I thought, whoa, how did she know that I was looking there? Because there's no way her eyes were open. But the same thing, she was completely void of experiences. There was absolutely nothing inside. This was not from trauma or anything else. This is because there were no experiences. There were no human experiences, because human experiences have emotion. And that's the difference that I'm going to say. I think the thing that sets us apart, are our experiences and our emotions. So you can transfer data into a machine, and you can even teach a machine that they should blink, you know, or mimic us in some way. But at the end of the day, you can even teach them or program them, I'm assuming, to respond with an appropriate emotion and what that might be. But are they actually experiencing the emotion, right? And so that's the difference. This person was absolutely void of anything. And I thought, wow, they're getting more clever because they sent something less threatening. They sent a female, you know, and it was such a good rendition of a human because this time it was less scary. And I thought, oh my God, it's another one. But the skin, the hair, the mannerisms, everything was extremely high tech. Um, but it was not real. It was not a real human.
Which then throws me right into this Alex Jones and Joe Rogan clip. This is where this bad boy comes in, for people that think human cyborgs don't exist. I remember this Alex Jones talking about this with Joe Rogan, which he said a lot of things in this episode that we're going to play this clip from. And I rewatched the entire thing from getting this clip yesterday, which from this episode is probably the best episode of all the 3 times that Alex Jones has been on Joe Rogan. But this is from a conversation almost, it was from 2019, 5 years ago, and it's from a 5-hour long conversation on Joe Rogan's podcast in 2019. The podcast number is 1255. Don't bother typing it in to YouTube. It won't come up, at least for me. Maybe my search engine is wacky, but this clip that we're getting ready to play is from Alex Jones in 2019 on Joe Rogan, and I'm going to pop up the fair use banner, and that this clip is covered under the fair use disclaimer section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, education, and research. And that is what we are going to be doing here today. YouTube is commenting on this Alex Jones, Joe Rogan podcast from 2019. That is probably the most difficult thing that ever took me to find ever. And instead of just talking about what Alex Jones was talking about in 2019, we're going to hear it directly from him and comment on it. So here we go.
I'm on record 20 years ago, before anybody else was talking about the Clockwork Elves.
This is from 2019, and telling YouTube that I am commenting over this video. This is for education purposes and research.
And now the globalists think they're in touch with these entities and things, only because, and I don't want to get, I'm not in the CIA. The CIA is bigger than Coca-Cola. It's like bigger than Walmart. I've never been in an intelligence agency. I've never been a part of any of this stuff. But I had family that was in advanced DARPA research projects that I don't know all the details about. And
this was really a throwaway line and a throwaway clip from this 5-hour long conversation, but it always stuck with me, and you'll see why it always stuck with me. It's only about a minute and 30 seconds, but it always put it in the back of my mind. I was like, wow, this is really interesting.
When I was a kid, my dad told me about some of it, not knowing I'd be a talk show host later. But like when the deputy director of the CIA needed to have a tooth pulled, he came to my dad. Okay. So my dad was like the doctor to, these guys. And I remember sitting around the kitchen table and I'm like 7. He's like, Carol, I can't tell you all about it, but it's a classified program in Maryland in an underground base. And they won't give me all the details, but it's double the money I'm making now. And this is for national security. But I think it's basically, we're building cyborgs, and we've got special forces that have volunteered so we can infiltrate the Russians and get codes and systems in. I believe it's implanting messages in their teeth, and I also think, as I do implants, I think it's a brain surgery program for microchips. And so I'm hearing, and my Carol's like, David, I'm sick of these people, and you've already done so much for this government, and look what they've already done to you and my brother. You're not going to be, I want you out of this. So this is like, 7, 8 years old, you're like hearing about the cyborgs, okay?
That was it. It was a throwaway type of line, but I remembered it and put it in the back of my head, and YouTube and the internet wanted to try and hide it from me and act like it didn't even exist. But I found it. Boom, it's there. And he said 20 years ago, so that came out in 2019. So that would have been late 1990s that he was talking about that. And it would have been even further back whenever he was a kid, and his dad was involved in this DARPA research program to create cyborgs.
Mhm.
So you're talking, I don't know, the 70s?
I mean,
70s,
yeah.
and then you think, well, how sophisticated, if they were doing this way back then, how sophisticated do they have them now?
Hmm. And where did the technology come from? And right. And yeah. And why, and what is the point? So, I mean, what that man said in the clip, I mean, there's a very large government point to what they were trying to accomplish, but it blows my mind away that I had two people check up on me. I find that really interesting, and um, on some level, it's upsetting. You feel unsafe. It's like what, because I came to the conclusion I never knew what they were. At first, I thought, like I told you, I thought the first one was a demon because I had no other reference point. But once the second one showed up, I thought this isn't a demon, but it's not human. And so at the time, I was being, making. I kind of had a following up there, and people were really interested in what I was doing, and I was motivating people, and their moods were changing. I'd have a classroom full of people, and they'd come in one way and leave another. And I think the point of what angels taught me is for us to step into our birthright, of what we are, and step into our place. And people aren't in their highest functioning form. People are stressed. Many of us are just trying to get, by day to day, paycheck by paycheck, surviving. So much stress in the world, so many problems. And when you have that kind of distraction, you can't evolve. You cannot go. You can't expand your consciousness. You can't live in a clean way where you're a machine. And when I say machine, I say our machine, right? Because we're an advanced system. Um, Most people, I mean, we're all built the same. We have the same hardware, the same software. There's the only difference between me and someone else is that I understand my equipment and I know how to use it. You know, and I was teaching people how to access their equipment. I was teaching people to shed their, I was assisting people in shedding their trauma, shedding their fears and their anxieties, seeing life from a different perspective so it would give them momentum and motivation and creativity, to bring out their gifts into the world and to do the same for others so that we all come to a higher place. And the point of everything is cliche as it sounds, is love. It's about raising our vibration. It's about becoming um, very intelligent, very aware, very compassionate, um, changing the face of this planet and evolving and having higher health, higher consciousness. And I was accomplishing that, and I feel like I was accomplishing that in my tiny little corner of my world. And I feel like for whatever reason, somebody just had to figure out what I knew and what I was about. And I still don't know really the origin of where that was. I mean, was it the government? Was it alien? You know, why was I being looked at? But I was absolutely being looked at and monitored.
Well, I think it's interesting because there's a direction that humanity can take that is way more human. Then there's another direction that it seems like we're being pushed into that is a fully robotic AI driven world. And I've said this on the record before, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's important that the transgender agenda is set up for the transhumanist agenda. That is what it's all about. That is why there's so much focus on kids. So that in 20 years, when those kids are growing up and they have all these ideas that they can change their body, they can be whatever they want, they can identify as whatever they want, they already have that basic concept in their head. So when it's time to merge most humans with machine, there's no laws, there's no restrictions that you have to get around because you've already implanted that into these young children's head. And the older generation will already be dead by that time. So there'll be nothing stopping the emergence of AI and machine into human beings. That's the agenda. That's what I see it as. That's what I've always seen it as. And it's a really scary thing. It's very scary. And that is the way that they want to push this new world that is trying to be created. And we have an option. We have a decision. We can go that way, or we can stop it now and do something different before it's too late, which I don't really think that it's ever really too late. There's always something that you can do, but it seems more and more like we're getting further into this technological cyborg AI driven reality. I mean, there was a professor and scientist that I just read an article about earlier before we got on the show that was talking about that AI is going to be in 20 years more advanced than any human on the planet.
I mean, to me, that's a frightening thing. And I understand that technology can be a good thing. Our oceans are polluted. Wouldn't it be great if there was great technology to skim all the pollution out of the ocean so that the planet could thrive, right? But when you're talking about, something that like you've suggested, I don't even know, like, it's not my forte, but and just like there's always good and bad, there can both sides exist. So, I just think people need to have a barometer, a moral barometer, and hopefully we all, cross our fingers that people that have access to technology have a moral barometer. But I will say that we all just need to start living in a more deliberate way, for sure.
I agree, absolutely. And Lauren, thanks so much for coming on and telling me and telling my audience about your experiences. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Really appreciate it. Can you let people know where to find you online, website or anything like that?
Sure, and thanks. I've really enjoyed this, Ryder, and I hope your audience has enjoyed it as well. So I have a website. It's laurentheshaman.com.
Awesome. The link to that website is in the description of this video. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Gigi, Ann, Noble Truth, Marissa, Adam, Savage Lee, anybody else, that Nightcrawler that was in the chat that contributed to the conversation. Hope you guys really like it. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications, and check Lauren's link that is in the description. And we'll see you guys next time. Lauren, stay with me.